Welcome to the Current Affairs YouTube channel. The Ukrainian war began because of fundamental territorial disputes that date back to the founding of the warring countries and are therefore embedded in both sides' understandings of their national identity. Any invasion by Russia of Ukraine was long expected to result in a sort of postmodern warfare defined by 21st century weapons, such as media manipulation, disinformation that shadows the battlefield, cyber attacks, false flag operations, and unmarked combatants. Such elements did come to the fore in this war, but instead traditional 20th century dynamics dominate. Almost a year has passed since the war began, but the contours of the war do not resemble any future war, but a certain type of conflict decades ago. That is, wars between nations in which one does not directly conquer the other. Every battle is unique, but specific trends emerging in this subset of conflicts, including Ukraine, can help shed light on what triggers week-to-week conflicts, what tends to determine victory or failure, and how such wars typically end. The Ukrainian war was driven, perhaps more than any other factor, into industrial attrition, as both sides struggled to keep the flow of supplies, like tanks and anti-aircraft munitions, that kept it in combat. Many conventional wars end in attrition. The side that can recover better over time is the side that can continue the war and ultimately win. The war between Russia and Ukraine is one of the wars that best fits this description. To give an example, the ability of either side to seize and hold territory is largely determined by the ability to field tanks and other heavy vehicles more reliably than the opponent. And because air power is effective at destroying such vehicles, the rate of ground wear on both sides is partly determined by whoever controls the sky. News of the conflict continues to come from Ukraine, which Russia has occupied in defiance of international law. Fierce fighting is raging in eastern Ukraine. Hot breaking points are experienced in the city of Stakhanov, located in the eastern Ukraine, in the Russian-occupied Luhansk Oblast. The Ukrainian armed forces launched a series of attacks on Stakhanov last night. Using HIMARS systems, Ukrainian soldiers launched 6 simultaneous attacks on the dispensary of a machine-building plant located on the territory of the city of Stakhanov. The first eruptions were recorded at 10:52 p.m., and a total of 6 eruptions occurred. While the attacks caused violent explosions, the machine-building facility in this area was completely destroyed. Huge clouds of dust rose into the sky as the facility collapsed. It is alleged that the purpose of the Ukrainian troops is a dispensary, on whose territory people can be found, including the wounded undergoing rehabilitation. No official statement has yet been made about this from the authorities of the pro-Russian Luhansk People's Republic, but all 6 missiles fired by the HIMARS system hit their targets, which caused the machine-building plant to be blown up. Ukrainian Marines clinched the success of the Ukrainian land forces, which showed strength with HIMARS missiles in Stakhanov. The Ukrainian Marine Corps eliminated 11 Russian invaders in the last day. The military units of the Naval Command, acting as part of the groups, continued to perform the tasks associated with repelling the Russian full-scale armed attack. The Ukrainian artillery and the Ukrainian Marine Corps opened fire on the Russian invaders, as a result of which the Gyatsin B towed gun and D-20 howitzer were destroyed. Since Ukraine's aggressive counteroffensive in late August, fighting has intensified in the Donbass, which includes most of the Luhansk and Donetsk regions, partly controlled by Russia and which Moscow claims to have annexed. Another region where hot conflicts take place is Sumy. The Russians bombed the 2 border settlements in the Sumy region a total of 27 times. At the same time, the Russian Sabotage and Reconnaissance Group tried to cross the border in the Sumy region from Russian territory. At around 5 a.m. the other day, a group of 6 was spotted by Ukrainian military units as they were trying to cross from the territory of the Russian Federation to the Yunukovy community. After the Ukrainian army opened fire, the Russian Sabotage and Reconnaissance Group fled and left the area. Undoubtedly, the violent conflicts have negative effects on the armies. The defeats they received in the Ukrainian war greatly eroded the Moscow army. According to figures released by Kiev, more than 20,000 Russian soldiers were killed in the war with Ukraine last month. Although unconfirmed, these figures show the ever-increasing trend of losses by Moscow forces. Despite the losses, the Moscow army is trying to advance in the south of Ukraine. The southern region is starting to move. With Moscow's withdrawal from the big city of Kherson in November, the front in Ukraine's south has been much quieter than in the east lately. As the Current Affairs YouTube channel, all of our findings are created by the work and analysis of our field warfare expert team and are based on data from the US, UK, Russia, and Ukraine Ministry of Defense and independent war analysis and monitoring sources. Moscow forces are allegedly advancing towards two towns in the Zaporizhia region of southern Ukraine, Russian state media reported. Vladimir Rogov, a Russian official in the region, said that the attacks were concentrated around the two towns. Orikhiv, about 50 kilometers south of the Ukrainian-controlled regional capital Zaporizhia, and Hulyai-Pole, further east, were subjected to Russian attacks. The Russian army then claimed to have taken more advantageous lines and positions for the second day in a row after offensive operations in the Zaporizhia region. In addition, the Russian officer in the region, Rogov, stated that he hit the Ukrainian positions in the village of Lezhino, outside the regional capital Zaporizhia, which was not captured by the Ukrainian forces. We touched on the breaking points in the Ukrainian front lines. Now let's take a look at the damage this war caused, especially to the Russian army. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces announced in an update last day that 860 Russian soldiers were purged in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of casualties to 120,160 since February 24th when the invasion began. It is also claimed by the Ukrainian authorities that Russia lost a total of 3,140 tanks, 6,256 armored combat vehicles, and 2,135 artillery systems. Russia, which has confirmed that only 5,937 Russian soldiers have died so far, does not often release figures. The Kremlin administration reveals that the Russian army may have a new structure in the coming months and years, as well as hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Last week, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu announced plans to restructure the Russian military. The Kremlin plans to reach 1.5 million personnel, which would mean an additional 500,000 soldiers in all branches of the Russian army. Shoigu announced the creation of a new corps in Karelia, near the Finnish border, the re-establishment of the Moscow and Leningrad military districts, and partially restoring the Soviet Union structure. A few days before Shoigu's announcement, the head of the Russian State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, stated that Russia will increase the upper age for conscription from 27 to 30, starting with the upcoming spring draft. According to the Kremlin's timeline, major structural changes will begin this year and be completed in 2026. Also, the fact that Russia and Ukraine's war seems to fit an old pattern rather than taking a new direction in the war, as is commonly assumed, could teach broader lessons for the world. Strategic weapons have not and will not replace armies. Conventional forces alone can seize and hold territory, making them the central unit of warfare. Newer technologies such as drones or satellite communications do not change this dynamic, nor do they have new methods such as cyber attacks or media manipulation. Weapons can help achieve a ceasefire, but by themselves they cannot achieve a long-lasting, settled peace. Despite many attempts by military powers, both large and small, to develop methods of warfare that are effective enough to impose their political goals on their opponents, Ukraine and Russia have yet to find a way to avoid the hard work of negotiating a mutually acceptable peace. If the states fail to reach an agreement, then even the war may end. Mutual exhaustion can bring peace. Morale in the Moscow military units is terrible, and the war is becoming less and less popular in Russia. These factors make it difficult for the Russian army to attract new troops, and history is not on the Kremlin's side. Thank you for watching us.